The insurrectionist next door is a Fed. Deep fakes from Gaza to DC. Bird flu is coming for you. And more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Wherever you're watching this, please subscribe right now. Give me a quick rating. Try to get that exposure up. I'm like shadow banned so hard. So the only way we're going to get people to learn about my return to daily news is by sharing it directly. So thank you. The first story I have for you today, President Biden commits the U.S. to a bilateral security agreement that cannot possibly be bilateral. It's all one way until and unless you count the blowback. I'm, of course, talking about his 10-year plan, his 10-year security agreement with Ukraine, not only to put Ukraine on a path to NATO membership, which is a sure path to World War III, but to establish commitments to Ukraine as if it already were a member of NATO. So I'll just read you like the 5 big points. It says, with the signing of this 10-year agreement, this was today on whitehouse.gov, the United States and Ukraine will work together to, 1, build and maintain Ukraine's credible defense and deterrence capability. It will lay out a vision for Ukrainian future force that is strong, sustainable, and resilient. They will strengthen Ukraine's capacity to sustain its fight over the long term. It will accelerate Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration. And it will, 2 things that are really important, achieve a just peace. This came up today in another context, that respects Ukraine's rights under international law, is underwritten by broad global support, upholds the key principles of the UN Charter, including sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means that you're not allowed to secede, which of course violates Vattel's Law of Nations, which is what our country was founded on, and includes accountability for Russia's actions. So I immediately think Versailles, like they're all going to get together and pull a Versailles on Russia. And they also are incorporating into this agreement a consultation in the event of a future Russian armed attack against Ukraine at the highest levels to determine appropriate and necessary measures to support Ukraine and impose costs on Russia. So it all sounds like we're careening towards World War III. I'm not sure if that's the actual goal. I definitely feel like this just peace / reparations is what I'm hearing when I hear this, is a big part of what we're doing here, because this dovetails with a different story that I had already started to work on when the news broke that they signed this agreement. And that is that the G7 has stated, the G7, whatever group of 7 European nations, has agreed to use Russian assets to, I don't know what euphemisms they used, but they're basically going to use Russian assets to buy US weapons for Ukraine. But the way they're going to structure it is, so what happened was when Russia finally retaliated against the US coup in Ukraine and the coup government's suppression of the eastern oblasts, the whatever, oppression, killing of tens of thousands of people. When they finally responded, like 8 years later, that was considered Russian aggression. And the Western countries, the European Central Bank, most of all, which is where the assets were, froze Russian assets so that they could not use those assets to support their aggression in Ukraine. That was the reasoning there. So that was $300 billion. Okay, $300 billion. And because they're frozen, Russia can't do anything with them. They can't redeploy them, whatever. And that money was mostly, from what I've read, money that Russia got in payment for oil and gas that they sold to, whatever, the West. Now it's been frozen, so they can't do anything with that money. So whatever assets it was put in, it's earning interest on that. or whatever the returns are on that. And I think it hasn't been that much. I think it's like $16 million in a couple of years, which is very little in an inflationary environment. Or maybe it's fair. Maybe it's, I don't know. I feel like it's half. I feel like in 2 years in this inflationary environment, they could get 30 million. They maybe should have been up 30 million. I don't know. But what the plan is to lend. So we have both the finance arm of the military industrial complex and the defense arm benefiting from this deal. They have agreed to lend Ukraine $50 million, with which Ukraine, if I'm reading between the lines correctly, will buy mostly U.S. defense. And you know what? Let's stop calling it defense. War material from the U.S. And then to service the debt. So Ukraine would have to pay interest on the debt. That would come from the interest that Russia is earning on its assets. So my guess is they're charging more for the loan than Russia is earning on those assets, because to service a $50 billion loan with the returns on $300 billion worth of assets, they could charge higher interest. But what really annoys me by this whole thing is, well, two things. So Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, I mean, I just seriously wonder if they have some kind of blackmail on this guy, because he expresses his legitimate ideas and then he completely capitulates. So at first he was saying, this is totally illegal and we can't do that. And even if it weren't illegal, it would be crazy to take their money, because this is a central bank. It's a government. Other people who we want to trade with or whom we want to deposit into the central bank of Europe will not put their money in there, because we could seize it and violate our own rules. This is a terrible idea. Then he just turns around and says, so he's the guy who's delivering the message, the guy who was the holdout. Who had been the holdout. We will use the windfall profits from Russian assets frozen in Europe to financially support the purchase of weapons for Ukraine. You know what a windfall profit is? A windfall profit is when you get this outsized return for no real reason. This is not a windfall profit. This is actually a crappy return considering the inflationary environment. Yet the article I read picks up on that language and runs with it as if they're actually reporting on a fact. It says 2/3 of the roughly 300 billion in reserves were sitting in European banks and clearinghouses. As those assets mature and are reinvested, they have generated profits that EU officials say could reach 15 billion euros, equivalent to more than $16 billion over the next 4 years. The bulk of the European assets were held by Belgium's Euro clearinghouse. And then, well, that is actually where it is. But throughout the article, they continue to talk about these windfall profits. Those are clearly not windfall profits. And they go on to say, I wonder if I have a quote here, if I just have to paraphrase. They are saying their argument is that Russia is going to, I think this might have been David Cameron, who used to be the Prime Minister of England, but now is the Foreign Secretary. Did I get that right? Am I not up on my UK officials? I believe it was he who said that Russia's going to have to pay reparations to rebuild. And that is what they're saying. Some of this money is going to go towards nation building. So maybe it's not all just defense money, war material. He said they're going to have to pay reparations anyway, so we might as well take it now. I mean, this just flies in the face of any sense of sovereignty, of international order. Forget the UN. They want to act like the UN is some entity that is bringing some value to an otherwise anarchistic world stage. But just regular respect for sovereignty would require that this doesn't happen. And yet it looks like they're doing it. So, I mean, I believe there should be some process, but of course there was a process with Versailles, and look how that ended up. I mean, think about how that ended up. Versailles was designed to give us another world war. I don't know if that's common knowledge. I mean, I certainly believe that. Anyway, so that's what's going on with that. So there's a G7 meeting. And the other thing that's happening there now, which is like crazy, how I would like to say it's the um, Bieder-Meinhof effect, where like just because you're thinking about something, you see it all the time. But I don't think that's it. Or it's like when you learn that what something means, you hear it all the time. I don't think that's what's going on here with this AI stuff and the AI fear porn stuff. I think it's just been launched. I think that Joe Rogan episode just launched it. And those guys, Jeremy and Edward Harris, put out that super scary 200 and something page report to the Congress, so that, I mean, that was in March. It was started in November 2022, and I think it was put out in March or May 2024. So like that is what launched this, I think. But it's everywhere. I mean, so many stories that I was looking at anyway. Throw the AI fear porn in there. This one was at the G7 meeting. The Pope is tasked with, at the behest of the right wing, what's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. There, she's in cahoots with the Pope, and she has tasked him with making a speech on AI ethics. And this is the quote from that article. It says, Italian premier taps. So I put all these articles in the show notes at monicaperezshow.com. Italian premier taps Pope Francis to warn G7 of AI disaster if ethics ignored. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and Pope Francis have joined forces to deliver a high-stakes warning to world leaders. Dive headfirst into AI without thinking about ethics, and you're essentially inviting disaster. And then this is from yesterday, and this is like yesterday was when I was talking about this. And if you think that these alt-right people or these extreme right people who are taking positions of power in Europe are not controlled opposition, I think going lockstep with these themes, especially the fear themes that are stimulating regulation, maybe that's why they're calling a lot of them left nationalists. I don't know, but like, got to start thinking about nationalists who are also socialists. Meloni said that she's worried about job losses and socioeconomic fallout from AI. Now, that was one of the two things that the Harris brothers were telling us to worry about: job losses and international security, or whatever, other countries getting the AI. So these are the things, like, we don't have a plan. We need a plan for all of these super scary things that AI is bringing down. And I have to say, all of this stuff is a result of our tax dollars funding research that the private sector would never have funded, because there's enough people to produce the things that those people consume. You know what I mean? Like, it's like tautological. You actually do not need to inject hyper economic technological research into the equation. It's not necessary. And over defense spending, like, I think we probably spend 4 times as much as we could ever justify from a defensive posture. That's all tech stuff. They're like hand in hand. Paolo Benanti, a Franciscan friar and tech guru who was cited throughout this article as being super pro what these guys are doing and how great the Pope is, because he can tackle migration, climate change, and AI. What a versatile superhero this guy is. Anyway, it's very interesting, the term this guy coined, which was algorethics, not Al Gore ethics, which would be an oxymoron, but algorethics as in ethics of algorithms. And that is very important. That was something that I'd mentioned on the Union of the Unwanted when I found this, like, one of the several press releases from the White House about doing about their AI policy, was about discrimination and diversity and stuff. I'm going to read you a little bit of that, but in this context, because you have like the nationalists doing it too, they're approaching it from populism. They're approaching it from the poor people in our country, the wealth disparity in our country. So we have the race stuff, they have the class stuff. Yes, their focus is on the poor. And then, okay, so I'm going to reread the headline for a second. Italian premier taps Pope Francis to warn G7 of AI disaster if ethics ignored. And then I read you more of like that super scary stuff. The last sentence of this article, last sentence of the article. On the other hand, the hype of AI may be totally overblown. A study published this week by LucidWorks declared, quote, the honeymoon phase is over after it found that the financial benefits of implemented projects and businesses have been dismal. So AI is a bust in the private sector. So they not only paid for it from our tax dollars, it has absolutely no application. Well, I mean, I'm saying this sentence suggests that it's possible that it couldn't it would never have paid for itself, which is of course why they didn't develop it. However, we did take our tax dollars to develop it, promised that it would revolutionize our job markets and make us more productive and make us more money at the same time that it's robbing us of jobs. That's that old union paradox. The union workers will always vote for pay raises that will result in less than 50% layoffs. So if you think 25% of the people are going to get laid off, but you're going to get a 50% raise, well, 75% of the people are going to vote for that. 100% if everybody thinks they're above average. So they promise you this economic benefit, even though it's going to cost jobs. But really, according to the Harris guys, the real high level stuff should accrue, the benefit should accrue basically exclusively to the US military. So funny. There was another article about the dangers of AI in today's newspaper. I'm not kidding. And it was big. It was like front page. The flood of pro-Hamas deepfakes targeting U.S. audiences. Israeli war sparking a massive propaganda conflict. So there was a study done by an Amsterdam-based company which said pro-Hamas content used AI to generate images of Gaza residents, especially children next to rubble and victims of alleged Israeli attacks. I've been wondering why so many people who watch and we chat on the sidelines there on when we go live is they're like, yeah, the pictures are fake. And I like this, the whole Gaza thing makes me super, super sad. Like it bums me out. And um, I'm from Syrian descent, Syrian Christian descent. I come from a really Jewish county in New York. I feel like the political that the just the weight of this politically has really dehumanized the reality, and it's hard to actually grasp the reality of it. And one of the reasons that I've had a hard time, not that I don't know what's happening, it's just to really dig into it and understand it when you're being flooded by these images that there is something screwy about it, it's overwhelming. And it's a deterrent for me to think that I could ever really get to the bottom of it. When people, a lot of people are paying attention to something and I don't think I can really crack the code, I tend not to spend my time on it because I run out of time pretty quickly. But I've been wondering, like, how could it be that it's really happening, which it clearly is, and the pictures are fake? Well, that's what I would call a taint, like I call a taint agent, someone who's in there to like Alex Jones and gun control. Like he's there, gun rights. He's there to taint the argument for gun rights because he seems crazy when he's jumping up and down on a chair, pounding the table for gun rights and pounding the table. So I consider the possibility that these images are there simply to replace real images they could use and make it look fake and make you wonder what's really going on. Anyway, maybe that was still my thoughts in motion on this one, but the article doesn't really dwell on that. What it does is it says Sensity AI, which is the reporting organization, said its findings heightened concerns about the AI tools affecting the US elections in November. And I had wondered what the big false flag was going to be for AI policy, because they're saying they want AI policy by the end of the year. I mean, FTX was the big false flag for crypto regulation, which will come eventually. So this article goes on to say foreign malign influence agents engage real people with the goal of having them echo their messaging, essentially co-opting their already established online megaphone while hiding the foreign origin of the influence message. Many of these tactics are not new, but generative AI tools have made it much easier and cheaper to generate and spread convincing foreign malign influence content. So they're saying that they're going to take people who already have certain ideas that, and I found it in an old U.S. government document where an attack strategy against an enemy, in this case their own people, is to enhance dysfunctional subcultures. So they're saying AI can find these dysfunctional these people that were a threat of that, generate echo through generative AI, which is sound and pictures and stuff that amplify, and I would say not just make them louder, but make them more intense in a way that's never been happened before. So they said that last month, the Senate Rules Committee advanced 3 bills focused on AI and elections, including legislation restricting deep fakes about political candidates, mandatory labeling of AI and political ads, and a push to develop voluntary guidelines for election offices. I'm thinking those kind of rules, I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, maybe it's just obvious, that during the election process, not even that I think it's real, but there are ways they have to manipulate the election. And maybe one of them is they're going to use this to take down real Facebook stuff and just say, you're crazy. It's generative AI. It's unfair until later. This is what happened in Alabama with Reid Hoffman's company where they had bots and stuff messing with the election, and it did change the outcome of the election. Unbelievable. But after it was done, it's not like they took the guy's seat away from him. I think it was Jones. I think that was the name of the guy. Anyway, they also said the pro-Israel side had deep fakes, which depicted large crowds waving Israeli flags. They used deep fake videos and voice cloning tools to portray celebrities expressing their support for Israel. That dovetails with yet another story I heard today on the news about Scarlett Johansson. Did you hear this? Scarlett Johansson has been asked to and may testify before Congress about her OpenAI debacle. Representative Nancy Mace invited the actress to speak at a House subcommittee hearing about deepfake technology. I mean, we know that as much as she can contribute, right? What happened was actress Scarlett Johansson had a tussle with OpenAI over the voice used for, quote, Sky, its GPT-40 chatbot. And that's what they want her to testify about. I'm sure other people have noticed this, but they're calling the chatbot Sky. Isn't the machine that takes over the world and kills all the people in Terminator called Skynet? I guess she's so funny. So funny. But they give this Altman guy a pass because they want him to look like the moral actor, like one of these effective altruist guys. So they said, well, she said, he asked me to do it. And I said, no. And it looks like he just faked it. And the answer was, no, we got the actress before he even talked to you. Just like coincidence. That reminds me of the Ghostbusters tune. They asked Huey Lewis to do it, and he said no. And so they just ripped off his song anyway and had to pay for it. They had to pay him for it. But they got the song they wanted. It said the controversy, the Scarlett Johansson controversy, raised further questions about AI's potential encroachment on culture and how it may affirm some of our biases. So just like the thing of enhancing dysfunctional subcultures, being a megaphone against all of the stuff people are already saying, here they're dangling the thread of may affirm biases. And this is a big thing. This is part of the massive, copious amounts of AI policy stuff that's coming out. Just look at the press releases on whitehouse.org. I mean, they have a task force and they're rolling stuff out. And I mean, the press releases are enormous. Can you imagine all the reports from all the task forces? I mean, if you click through, sometimes you can't click. Sometimes you have to copy and paste and search because they don't want you to click. But so one of the things that I just happened to, when I looked this up then today, because I remembered it, algorithmic discrimination protections is the headline in one of these White House initiatives. The sub headline is "You should not face discrimination by algorithms, and systems should be used and designed in an equitable way." So it says algorithmic discrimination. And remember, the papal guy said algorithmics. Algorithmic discrimination occurs when automated systems contribute to unjustified different treatment. Unjustified different treatment sounds bad. How would it do that? I don't know. Or impacts disfavoring people based on their race, color. It lists a whole bunch of things: disability, veteran status, genetic information, or other classification protected by law. So this is a big thing with race. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but I remember learning it in law school. Disparate impact is de facto racist, even if there was no racist intent. So if you have a rule that gives, I don't know if they actually go through and say if the pool of applicants is 90% white and it gives 90% of the jobs it would spit out for the job opening are white, if that's a disparate impact, or because it's majority white, but if the applicants are majority white, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There are cases that show how that stuff is assessed, but I'm just saying a disparate impact may affect the reality of the situation. Women are the ones with wombs. They make the babies. So they do take time off. They should be at the exact same age, more junior to guys they went to business school with, just based on the physical demand. I mean, I guess if you're doing business from the delivery room, but that's not realistic, nor is it desired. However, the impact is disparate, but the impact of having a baby is disparate from being the dad, and it's like super cool. You know what I mean? There's value there too. You don't have to take these things in isolation. Anyway, but this is what it says has to be done. Designers, developers, and deployers of automated systems should take proactive and continuous measures to protect individuals and communities from algorithmic discrimination, and to use and design systems in an equitable way. This protection should include proactive equity assessments as part of the system design, pre-deployment and ongoing disparity testing and mitigation are required. So that means you do the best you can. And if you see the disparate impact, however you might measure that, you have to go back and fix it. You have to keep tweaking it. You have to keep biasing it in the other direction. It says independent evaluation and plain language reporting in the form of an algorithmic impact assessment, including disparity testing results and mitigation information, should be performed and made public whenever possible to confirm these protections. And there's problems here, because if it keeps biasing towards a smaller and smaller minority, or just like anybody but a white guy, you have like all of the high level jobs going to half of the people. Shoot. I went so far over that last time that I don't want to go over again today. So I want to get to the content. So you get the idea. It's affirmative action can cause, well, I would say intended consequences, but this, and the big thing is it's going to reshape, AI is going to shape our reality, and it's going to intentionally curate it to distort the reality. I mean, whatever that may be, I don't know what it would be. It may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing, I don't know. I don't know whether I like it or not, but I'm just saying it will distort reality. One thing I had teased to, I didn't get to, so I'm going to do it in like 5 seconds. There were cases of bird flu reported in America, and absolutely 3 cases supposedly from cattle to human contact, which means, anyway, This may also be a fear porn kind of thing. So, at least at this stage, but I did wanna highlight I listened to a podcast, that I'll put in the show notes. It was Peter McCullough on David Gornosky, and just, like, a few things I pulled from that, which is they were doing research on ducks for avian flu, like chicken flu. They gave it to ducks that migrate. Chickens don't fly, ducks fly, so you're never going to be able to contain it now. The gain of function will be obvious if it starts jumping to humans because that's just something that absolutely it has been hard work to make happen. He says that respiratory communication is how it gets passed. It's not surface, so whatever. And he said the worst thing you can do is cull the herds, kill the animals because it's a pretty mild disease. So if you just let it run its course, then the remaining organisms will just be more resistant to it, or the virus like generally gets weaker when that happens. So because the ones that it kills, that virus or that organism, those things are no longer in the population. Only the things that can keep the animal alive would be left in the population. So lots to think about there. And let's get to some comments, and then I'm going to get to our clip, which is the insurrectionist next door is a Fed. Okay. They are, Angus says, so trying to bring back the Cold War so the defense industry can make another fortune defending us. Angus says it's robbery to take that Russians' money. Absolutely agree. And those are the people of Russia. I mean, it's not Putin's money. Stealing Russia's money killed the petrodollar, frightening me, says. And reminds us, which I did recall, the Defense Department used to be called the Department of War, as it should be. Stuart has some cabbage and he's thinking of Lanny. Oh my gosh, how I love cabbage. Oh my gosh, cabbage and liver. So my son who has Down syndrome, very funny. I Nobody else was home, so I got to make us liver because we both love it. And I sauteed onions, mushrooms. I put some like sage in the butter first and let it get crispy, like whole pieces of sage. That just put it over the top. And I had some leftover fingerling potatoes. So I'm not a great cook. This is basically stuff I harvest from the fridge after my husband cooks. I cook great like grilled cheeses, but he cooks fingerling potatoes. And so we're eating this like gourmet meal. And my son looks at me and he says, could use some sauerkraut. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so excellent. A boy after my own heart. Yeah, but I wonder if I'll just sometimes, if I'm desperate, buy liver from the freezer in the grocery store. And I just don't know. I just don't know. Oh my gosh, I forgot about appeal. Angus tells us about appeal, that stuff that like the invisible skin they put on vegetables. Oh my gosh. Uh, I will have to start growing my own sauerkraut, which I probably could. Jack thinks they might have to oversell AI because it's not going to be what they truly want it to be, which is human. That may be true. And actually, the way those guys were talking about how the really fancy stuff should be in the exclusive hands of the US government. Once it is, it could be like the Stephen Hawking thing, where once he was completely incapable of communicating and his computer said everything for him, once you don't have the real information, they can say whatever they want about it. And they could perhaps conduct some really, really high level psyops and blame it on AI. Maybe they'll give us a Skynet that's really just some guy pressing, dropping nukes. And Renee's right on top of that thought. They might not trot it out, or at least pretend for a while that it's real. Yes. See, we're really on the same page. Jack then says, if they pretend and you believe it, it's the same as if it worked the way they said. The Pope and world leaders, Angus says, what do they know about ethics? I could not think of a worse person to speak on ethics, possibly other than Fauci's wife, who's the head of bioethics or medical ethics or whatever in some government organization of high status, than the Pope. Oh my gosh, Renee, I do the same thing every time I see Stella. I think Stella or Stilla. Like sometimes I think the Australian and New Zealand accent is like all the vowels are eyes. By the way, one of the bird flu fear porn things was out of Australia. So I've noticed that Australia, the UK, the US, Canada, like we all have the same stuff going on. I guess we are like a de facto part of the Commonwealth, except for I've noticed lately, like with all these Canadians, especially with AI, I think Canada might be our handlers. Like Canada might be the handler, the Commonwealth handler of the US. I'm not sure. Uh-oh, I think I might have. Oh, Stella, right. She's not yelling at me. She's writing Monica, so I pull the thing up, the comment up. A big part of what they are doing is absolute desensitization. So putting the deep fakes out there of the atrocities alongside or instead of the actual pictures of atrocities, or bombarding me constantly with numbers that I can't get my mind around or cannot tolerate. Uh, yeah, it's yeah. I have made a decision though about stuff that is highly, highly covered. I used to say this about abortion when I was on the radio, is that like, and Israel too, like people and 9/11. I wouldn't if so many people cover those like it's extremely polarized. People talk about it a lot, all those things a lot. There's like absolute camps, whatever, and single issue stuff. And when I was on the radio and there were like 40,000 people who were listening to hear the traffic and the weather, or 20,000, however many, um, they weren't really necessarily listening for me. At least only a third of them listened for the host, from what I understand, in that kind of radio. And they would get super pissed and they would call me and scream at me, shut down my show, hate me forever, blah, 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 blah. And I would accomplish nothing. And ultimately, I did get taken off the air. My guess is for the content. And I just thought, and that stuff that is being absolutely covered, let people cover it. I don't need to wade into it. And it helps because what are you going to do? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's like, I had one guy who just would constantly try to convince me to spend all my time on pro-life stuff. And I was like, my mom's spending all her time on pro-life stuff. Like, I mean, and it's working. That's good. But like everyone can't spend all their time on, whatever. I decided to be a dilettante and I don't know. I think we might have to go with that. Sometimes we cry over silicone babies. Joe Hansen is a puppet. Okay, good. If you guys are all right, from now on, like in this day, I'm only gonna put stuff up that starts with my name because I'm running out of time. Instagram, Lala Pro Fresh says Instagram already has an optional toggle to mark your posts as AI generated or not. Maybe mandatory soon. Oh my gosh, funny. Sam Altman, computer guy. Yeah, no. All right. See, since Stella's the only one doing the Monica thing, she's going to get all the airtime. Have you heard the name CEO of World Economic Forum? Anyway, his name is Ferret, probably a name of Larry Fink. LOL, it's killing me. I don't get it. But I'm also completely distracted because I have a lot to talk about in the Monica. In Australia, they have pigeon pox, canary pox, turkey pox. Maverick says the avian flu doesn't even need to make anyone sick. It just needs to be able to trigger a positive and a ramp up PCR, and they can manufacture a new pandemic and kill all the animals. Frightening Me says, I always listen to your WSB show for your info. Thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I would have been gone a lot sooner, I think, if I spent all of my time arguing with single issue, passionate people who I agreed with them half the time, but you know. All right. I have to go to the clip. Thanks everybody for hanging through that. I know I have to pause to read through those. I'm going to have to come up with a better system. Actually, Stella said she would help me, so maybe I will let her do that. All right, I am here. Let me tell you what we're looking at here as I run out of time. Okay, so there's been a lot of hullabaloo about this little clip. I don't know how long it is, not even a minute maybe, where Nancy Pelosi's in a car saying, I should have had the National Guard in January 6th. I didn't expect how bad it would be. And this was not released sooner than now. People are saying it should have been in the HBO documentary that her daughter made. That's who filmed it. Or it should have been given to the committee of January 6th, and it wasn't. And Fox is saying that it's a way that they were trying to suppress her culpability. And of course, to me, when I saw it, I thought this is the lab leak theory of January 6th. So you have Fox News stipulating that January 6th was such a predictable shit show that they should have had the National Guard there on top of the Capitol Police. The Capitol Police is as hardcore as a police department can get in this country, and they're opening offices in other places around the country. Be scared of that. You want to be scared of something? Be scared of that. Anyway, so she's like saying, my bad. I should have been hardcore. Okay, so these are the clips I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that clip, and I just think it's a way to forget the question of how real January 6th was. Then I'm going to play a clip of her daughter, who has made 16 documentaries, supposedly a compassionate look at the insane right. That's her claim to fame. I think I actually have like a funny I think this might have been for Wikipedia. Though she is Democratic royalty, Ms. Pelosi, Alexandra, has spent much of her career dissecting with compassion the psyche of the political right in America. So in addition to having 2 kids, she made 16 world-class documentaries in 20 years on this subject. So bullshit. So I don't know what she's up to, but she was being interviewed with regard to the Insurrectionist Next Door, which was her treatment for HBO of the January 6th thing. So I'm going to let you watch that, and I want to see if you feel like I do, that she's nervous, that she's glancing at her script. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is I found a video that was played by the committee, the Insurrectionist Committee or whatever, January 6th committee in Congress. It's like 8 minutes long. A couple of really wacky things about this. First of all, it's a congressional hearing, and the clips, the footage of January 6th that they're showing you are spliced together like an entertainment production, which I remember observing at the time. This was 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. But they show footage that if you turn off the sound looks kind of normal, but it has like crazy riot sounds in the background. Then they show super up close, tight footage of like the cops being scared and people being crazy. And that's the stuff that I think was staged much later. I think they had tried to provoke a real uprising. And if you heard my show on January 7th, the day after, with a good friend of mine who was there, she had sent me tons and tons of footage. It was very clear this thing was like a music festival. It was not like a riot. She said she saw people climbing up walls that made no sense. They were like walls to nowhere, and the doors were open to the Capitol. The doors opened. She walked right in. She walked in, and she brought her, like, she had a crucifix with her because she was there with the right to life. Walked right in. She said a guy came out saying about like somebody's been shot in there, and she said like it was like almost like right when the doors opened. So she thought, well, who was even in there? and she didn't believe the guy at all. She said, "You're full of shit." And he said, "Look at my friend's phone." She said, "I don't have to look at his phone. You're both full of shit." And he said, "We're Marines." And she's like, "So what?" Um, she said some interesting things, and I realized that all her video footage, which she told me I could post, I didn't post because I was afraid in advance of it actually happening. People getting doxxed. And then when I found out later that anybody whose face was in that any video that was shown, every single one of those people, like an amazing number of people, were visited by the FBI. And I realize, and I feel very strongly, that the reason for that was to make sure that everybody took all their videos down, because if they hadn't, you would literally have millions of hours of video showing every nook and cranny of that place and proving. I would say you could easily piece together a timeline from various actual physical angles that would show exactly what happened in great detail on January 6th, which I do not think is represented by these videos, which I consider to be staged. And the reason that they are doing it is in one of these clips I have. It's Nancy Pelosi. It's like 10 seconds. And she's like, "We need to just get through this. Make sure Arizona is the last state, the only state that files an objection, and just get it done." Because this was going to be a 3-day process. 4 states were objecting. And the way it happened the last time, which was after the Civil War, they had a disputed election like this, and they had an investigation and a negotiated settlement. And that's what I expected. It was the only outcome I could see, because those 4 states weren't backing down until January 6th happened. So all of these clips together is I'm probably going to stop and just highlight a couple of things, but that's where we're going. And this is pretty crazy. Her daughter was the one on site on January 6th filming Nancy in the war room. So Nancy didn't think it was that big a deal, which is why she didn't go in for the National Guard. Yet her daughter, a documentary filmmaker, went to work with her that day. Her daughter is like 50 years old. She went to work with her that day. How many other days did she go to work with her? How many other electoral certification days did she go to work with her? I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. Here we go.
We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that
So actually, the reason I think that they didn't release this originally was that she was flubbing her lines. She just wasn't really getting it right. It wasn't very convincing.
should we call the Capitol Police? I mean, the National Guard? Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient
There's
resources.
not a question of how they have, but they don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
So that was where she says they didn't know how bad it was going to be.
We never thought, hey, those people are going to break windows, storm into the Capitol, and poo in the Speaker's office. Like, no, we never thought that. So it's hard for people that didn't walk into the Capitol after this was all over and see they broke everything. They shattered mirrors. They broke every glass in the kitchen. They broke everything. I was looking and I thought, well, there's just some people with Trump flag,
Remember that cop that we heard talking outside the Trump trial after De Niro? There was a picture of him doing some of that stuff, which is kind of fishy. And check this chick out. This is Pelosi's daughter. And I think she seems a little nervous. And I think she's glancing at her script every once in a while.
That's their First Amendment right. I never thought they're going to come and they're going to, make all of these staff members who are surrounding us right now hide under a desk for hours in in fear. It just, so that's what I think is interesting about the whole January 6th postmortem, is the idea that regular, normal people just, it was like a switch went off and they just triggered, and it was like who was instigating that? That's what I think is interesting coming out of these trials and out of the commission, and where did they get these ideas? Because I think a lot of these people got swept up in the moment. And I get calls from jail. You know, I'm a documentary filmmaker, so I get calls. I don't know if some of this has been reported, but I get calls from these people. And I talk to them and I ask them about this stuff, you know, the Jan 6 insurrectionists that are in jail, and they call me and then we have these conversations and they say, oh, I got swept up in the moment. One of them sent me 2 books on cults and he said, if you read these books, you'll understand. I just got swept up in the moment. You know, so there's this whole idea that what people do in crowds and how they get carried away. And, you know, then they go home and they're really embarrassed and ashamed, and they go in front of a judge and they say, I don't know how this happened to me. I'm a nice person. And it was just this one weird thing that happened that afternoon. Yeah, people got swept up, but somebody was stirring the pot.
So they're mind controlled. They're like MK Ultra'd by some cult leader, some secret cult leader, which who do you think that might be? I don't know. Let's see. Let's see who makes people crazy and act crazy. Maybe her mom can give us a clue. Okay, this is the footage that's being played to Congress during the commission to study it. This is not evidence. Like, could you imagine in a court of law if you try to show evidence of something happened, like footage, if it was like an edited clip together thing, and it shows. So you just have to look at it with an eye towards with the close-up shots and whatever. You'll see.
Found it. They're taking the north front scaffolding. Unless we get more munitions, we're not going to be able to hold. The door has been breached, and people are gaining access into the Capitol.
It looks super, super scary, right? But that doesn't look scary. Her focus is on getting the count done.
Senator Schumer is at a secure location, and they're locked down in the Senate.
There has to be some way we can maintain the sense that people have that there's some security or some confidence that government can function and that we can elect the president of the United States. Did we go back into session?
We did go back into session, but now apparently everybody on the floor is putting on tear gas masks to prepare for a breach. Well, I'm trying to get more information.
They're putting on their
Tear gas masks.
I can't. We need an area for the House members.
Look at they're wearing plastic bags on their heads.
They're all walking over now through the tunnels.
What do you think of that chick? They reused some footage there. I don't know if you noticed. Okay, this is Nancy saying we're trying to figure out how we can get this job done today.
We talked to Mitch about it earlier. He's not in the room right now, but he was with us earlier and said, you know, we want to expedite this and hope.
Mitch McConnell said, yeah, we want to expedite this, and hopefully they could confine it to just one complaint, Arizona.
So they could confine it to just one complaint, Arizona, and then we could vote, and that would be, you know, then just move forward with the rest of the state.
So that's I think that was what the whole goal, the whole thing. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for coming, and don't forget to subscribe and maybe give me a rating. This is Monica Perez.